Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast. Hey, Future Wealth Builders, this is Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and thank you for joining me on the New Wealth Wave podcast. Today, we are on stages 4 and 5 of the 7-stage generational wealth model, and to help lead the discussion will be Dominique Henderson, CFP. This man is a superstar in this industry. Top 100 in regards to Investopedia, 21, 22, and 23. Has a company called DJH Capital Management, also Jumpstart Coaching Lab. Dominique, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Dr. Wallace, it is a pleasure. I'm glad we finally were able to connect.
Yeah, I mean, you're a busy person. We've been trying to get this. How long? This about 6 weeks now? We've been trying to get you on the podcast. I mean,
don't throw me under the bus like that so soon.
And so appreciate you coming on board. For those who are tapping in for the first time, the New Wealth Wave podcast, we focus on the 7-stage generational wealth model. Again, make sure you subscribe to the New Wealth Wave podcast. We have some evergreen content, lots of fun, great discussion. We have industry experts coming on using this platform to provide their idea in terms of where financial well-being is at. So today, again, we have Dominique Henderson coming on. So first, let's go over the 7-stage generational wealth model. So with stage 1, it's our internal and external ecosystem. Stage 2 is our financial genetic code, where we focus on financial anxiety and financial trauma. Stage 3, we focus on financial healing, and we also focus on reprogramming your financial genetic code, which is stages 1 and 2. So that's very important to mention that. Stage 4, where Dominique is coming in today, he's going to help lead the discussion, is financial edification, where we focus on financial literacy as well as financial inclusion. Stage 5 is financial well-being. Dominique, as you know, we're all trying to get to financial well-being, having that soft landing. Stage 6 is generational knowledge, where we're creating our financial footprints. And stage 7 is generational wealth. So again, first time out, make sure that you subscribe to the New Wealth Wave podcast. You can also tap the link in the description to download a PDF of it as well to follow along with the podcast itself. So Dominique, before we get into the heavy lifting, before we get there, we always ask one question to kind of lighten the mood. So tell us one fun fact about yourself.
Oh man, 48 years of living. I got a lot of fun facts. How about March 17th? Through March 27th of this year, the whole family, all 5 of us, my 3 adult children, my son who's serving in the military, we all went to South Korea for 10 days, and it was a blast. I'm still high on that trip. It was just a great time with family, saw so many different things, almost sensory overload. If anybody's been to South Korea, Seoul, it's a beautiful place. People are great. The food is great. So that's something that I just recently done that maybe not a lot of people know. I haven't posted a ton about it on social media yet.
Well, I'm excited to hear about those stories as well. So Dominique, you had a chance to review the model. What was your initial thoughts?
I think this is great. It's very thorough and comprehensive, which is what I think is necessary in today's landscape. And we'll obviously kind of double click and get into these different things. But I think the financial services industry overall, from my purview, this is year 26 for me, has done a really good job of extracting rents from the consuming financial public. However, I don't know that the juice has always been worth the squeeze, if you will, from the consuming public standpoint. And there's been a focus on some areas that, like AUM gathering and product sales that don't always emphasize the 7 stages that you outlined, which I think are necessary for a person to get to the level of financial well-being, generational wealth creation that most people want.
So here's a 3-stage question that we pose to each of our guests because it kind of sets the tone for the actual episode. So we mentioned that you've been in the business for over 20 years. Where were you on the model before you became an advocate in this financial literacy and educational space?
Oh, that's a good one. Let's go back a little bit. So I graduated from Prairie View University at HBCU in Texas in 98. Immediately start working for a hedge fund and stayed there for about 8 years. And I think although I had an inkling about what I wanted to do, I was one of those kind of kids. I wasn't like all over the place, like, I want to do this, I want to do this. I was like carrying a briefcase, wearing my dad's suit coats and ties when I was like 9 years old. So this was probably a destined path, if you will, a predestined path. But as far as my own awareness around this and unpacking my own money story and some of the different things that I brought into adulthood from adolescent and even early years, I realized that we have at the bottom of the pyramid, if you will, we have kind of like shaping experiences that inform our mindset about money and about things, but let's stick with finances and money. That mindset informs what I call deliberate practice, how we act, how we believe, how we behave. And then that deliberate practice gets us results. Now, if our results get us in bondage, debt, bad financial decisions, all the like, we can change our results by doing better deliberate practice or better behaviors. And that's kind of the aha that I had. And that probably happened towards the end of my time at the hedge fund, which is around 2005, 2006. I had launched my very first business. That didn't go as well. I launched a real estate business right in the height of the financial crisis and right before mortgages started going bad and stuff. And I learned a lot of tough lessons there I now use to coach other advisors and advise my clients. That's kind of where I inserted myself. And I think maybe that's a 3-4 financial healing, financial edification, kind of. It sounds like in your model where I was.
Yeah, actually it does. What it allows the persons that's listening to this podcast to say, this person's just like me. Although we are financially educated, right? Because we have
knowledgeable.
Yeah, there you go. Knowledgeable. We have the license and things of that nature. We have baggage too. We still are, we're not perfect. And oftentimes, we try to provide the airs that we are perfect, but we are just like anyone else. I'm constantly navigating the model back and forwards myself as we speak today. So You kind of talked about it in your response, your first response, but what was your aha moment that made you realize that change was imminent?
Change to start forming a better mindset is what I think you're alluding to here. I have an aunt that had so many great sayings, great aunt. And one of them was, baby, sometimes the best lesson is about lesson. So go to the real estate venture that I had. I was excited, probably watched way too many episodes of Flip That House back from, A&E. I'm dating myself a little bit, but it was the self-employment venture really taught me more about not just finances and, money, what to do about debt and creating wealth, but it was things that it taught me about myself, like how I manage stress, how I managed anxiety, how I manage fear around some of these money concepts. And I think those are huge ahas for me, right? Because when you make a decision as a head of household and you mess it up and you have to go back and talk to your wife, and or explain to your kids, those are things that foster humility or pride if you don't want to be humble about it, right? So those are some ahas for me that were transformative.
Based upon that, now we're full circle. So where are you currently on the model today?
I would say I'm trending towards, and just to be in full transparency, I think I, like you, vacillate between a lot of these stages too. So, sometimes I'll be thinking, hey, I'm on my way to the financial well-being, the generational wealth building track. And then something will pop up and I'll be like, is that in my genetic code? Like, where did I get that idea from? Right. Those kind of things. Or I'll be having a conversation with somebody like a client. They'll start talking about their money story and it'll trigger something in me. And I'll be like, well, I didn't resolve that. I am more consistently trending towards and beyond financial well-being. There are things I've put in place to create generational wealth, regardless of what happens to me from this day forward, which is great. It's great to have those type of things in place. And so, yeah.
And that's interesting because again, we're all vacillating, back and forth through the model itself. Stages 1 and 2 is the past, stages 3 and 4 is the present, stages 5, 6, and 7 is the future, right? And so we're kind of going back and forth. It depends on where you're at your particular stage of your life. You mentioned talking to your clients. Where are most of your clients at in regards to the model?
Prospective clients come to me in a lot of different areas. And maybe we'll get into the financial advice continuum that we talked about online. But I think what I've seen inevitably, no one typically comes to me. I would say 99% of the cases are not like this. Maybe there's 1% or 0.5% that are like, nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I want to call Dominique and create a financial plan. That's what I want. I want a financial plan. I want somebody to whip me into shape, create financial plans, steps 1 through whatever. And because I got some bad disciplines that I do and yada, yada, yada. Nobody does it. What typically happens is somebody has an event in their life. Sometimes it can be catastrophic. Someone dies, they inherit money. I just talked to a prospective client. Her daughter died in an accident that was not her fault, through like medical procedures and whatnot, and she got settlement. Well, the settlement brought a huge amount of wealth, but at the same time, she's counterbalancing that with the loss of her child. right? So people come with tons of what I would call non-financial baggage with their financial issue, which hints upon, and I hope I'm answering your question, which hints upon the financial professional really being empathetic and emotionally intelligent to realize there's many sides to this proverbial coin here. And so I think I run the gamut when it comes to where people are in their life when they come to me and say, I want to retire with $3 million. Or I think the first thing that a financial professional could do is ask why, and ask why several times, because you then eventually peel back enough layers of the onion to see what the feeling is behind whatever they said originally. And that's the most important part to me.
That's so important because, we talk about empathy. And again, we talked before we got on air is that, to me, in regards to financial planning, advice, consultation, education, whatever the case may be, you have to have an empathetic ear and you have to have servant leadership in order to make that work. And oftentimes and not, we find those who may not have those in line. So with that being said, that leads me into this next question for you. So now you are an advocate in the financial space. However, you are more dedicated towards educating those interested in becoming financial professionals. Why is that a mission of yours? I knew you'll like that question.
Yeah. Let's start with the macro part of it and then double click on whatever part you want. I genuinely believe with all my heart, real financial advice, relatable, empathetic, attentive, listening, all those qualities within financial advice, if that is displayed, conveyed, enacted by financial professionals, it has the ability to change family trees. And I just believe everybody should have the opportunity to change family trees. So that led me to make a decision several years back, which was, do I open up an independent firm, serve, let's say 1,000 families over my time in the industry, maybe a little bit more? Or do I take the knowledge that I've accumulated to this point and start using that to teach others who will open up their own firms and reach way more than I would ever be able to reach? That was kind of the reason why I decided to hone in on and put my focus and energy towards training others, because I thought the latter of the two made the most sense and would have the most impact.
And I agree with that because, again, we talked about in the model itself, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And oftentimes we don't have enough of the information to create that wealth to be successful, like you said, creating those family trees. So I applaud you for that. Now, let's talk about your 15-step financial advice continuum. And it was interesting because, I was listening to your YouTube. You spoke to someone where you counseled someone that was a guest on our podcast, which was Sandra Davis. Now, we all know Sandra Davis is she's like an icon in this industry. She's at Golden Gate University. I work under her in her financial planning department. So, we had her on as well. And she's just a dynamic person. So when I heard that, I said, oh my God, we're all in alignment here. But, tell us about the 15 steps. It's fascinating. I love it. And so I want to give you the opportunity to kind of educate our listeners on that.
Yeah. So a couple of disclaimers. First of all, Sandra is salt of the earth type of people. I talk to Sandra every week. Really great friend, brilliant mind, extraordinary woman all around. The second disclaimer, I won't enumerate all 15 steps. To be quite honest, it's more of an ideal than an actual diagram. Maybe I should develop this. I don't know. People will understand what I'm talking about in just a second. And then the last thing is, let's make sure that we link up the same video I share with you in the notes so that people can see this visually. Without me drawing this out, this might be a little confusing for people. But anyways, I was having a conversation with an industry friend, Wilson Muscadin, several years back on my podcast. And we started down a similar track of discussion. And he brought up the idea that there are so many different, let's call it entry points. Let's go back to what you said about where clients come to me. Where do they come to me at? Like, this is what we're talking about, these various entry points. I just inherited some money. I just retired. I want to go on vacation. My kids are older. I want to put some money away from college, whatever the thing is. People come to us with so many different angles, if you will, on their finances. And I just thought it was an interesting notion in our discussion that people come in from various entry points. Just think about a building with several entry points, doors, if you will. And the industry was focused on answering the knocks at just one door. How much money do you have? What product can I sell you? Yada, yada, yada. And what I would say is most people don't need that. Let's call that, if somebody's got, let's say $1 million or $500,000 to invest and they're able to be into a structured product or something like that, they are later along in that cycle. right? So if you say stage one, hypothetically begins with financial ignorance. I don't like to use the term illiterate anymore, but financial ignorance. And you want to ascend to financial, let's use your term, generational wealth and financial well-being, right? Financial well-being, let's call it, stage 10 or so. The financial services industry seemed to be really focused on people that were already at stage 10. What about the people stages 1 through 6? So that's where this idea came, is there's a ways to go before you get to financial well-being. You got to pass through so many different stages. And my understanding of this, as I looked at the, kind of the construct of this, is that so many more people want to work with a financial professional are probably stages 1 through 6 or so, right? They have not reached financial well-being. They are still struggling, not like to pay their bills. They may be, but they're struggling with concepts that are just foreign to them. I had a call earlier today, the mother of one of my clients who just retired a couple months ago. And, she has orphaned retirement plans, as I would call them. And she was like, can I combine these? Well, maybe. It depends on what the employer sponsored plan documents say, right? And she has questions around this. And she just doesn't really even understand what she's been invested in, right? So all this to say, we need several different types of financial professionals to answer all those knocks at the door. We need coaches, we need counselors, we need therapists, we need advisors, we need planners. And that is what the financial advice continuum is about, is as a professional, finding where you fit to answer the knocks at all those doors.
I love that, because when I read it and I listened to it, I said, this is what my model is saying. It's the same thing, basically looking at it from a holistic approach, because, we're in the business, but there are those individuals who think they are at the point where they're trying to get to generational wealth. And one of the things that I know you and I have to kind of remind them of is that generational wealth isn't for you and I. Generational wealth is for those behind us. What we're trying to get to is financial well-being and generational knowledge to create the financial footprints. However, as you just mentioned about the client that just called you, you have those calls all the time where they don't know the language. They don't know what they're investing in. So stage 4 is financial edification, where we look at financial inclusion. That is so important, because we have to first know exactly how to play the game. We have to know the rules of the game to be able to take full advantage of it. I totally agree with you on that. But in your professional experience, though, Dominique, give me a few examples of this concept and why is it so important and often overlooked?
Yeah, let's go back a little bit, because I'm a big fan of making sure we're all on the same page, as you are too. I think we often use the same vocabulary but different definitions. So let's just start with financial education, because you said something that I have not brought into the continuum. So thank you. So these discussions help me update my frameworks. So if you think about generational wealth building, before we get to this financial education definition, if we use the analogy of creating generational wealth being like creating a family tree, right? Updating your family tree for the generations beyond you. You just said something that really caught my attention that is going to help me update my framework. When you are a tree and you bear fruit, the fruit is not for the tree. It's for others. So I think you introduced a very important concept in this whole framework, which is in order for you to be beneficial for generations to come, it's very, very important for you to realize that the fruit is not for you, which has several implications when it comes to edification, because you got to build yourself up so much as a tree so that the fruit that you're actually bearing is worth something. This process is actually a very sacrificial process. Now, that's not to say you won't benefit. It's just to say that largely, if you do this well, you want people to be able to get fruit from you forever versus just a lifetime of you being the tree. Yeah, I'll work on that a little bit more, but thank you. I appreciate it.
No, and that's why we're here, because iron sharpen irons, right? We're both here learning from each other. And that's why I was so excited when I first reached out to you. I see what you was trying to do. I love your stance. I love your position. And then after reading in the 15 stages, I was like, this is definitely, where I'm at. And it kind of overlaps it perfectly in terms of this discussion today.
But okay, I don't want to rob your audience of the definition. So financial education, in my opinion, is the process by where you, as an individual, a consumer of financial services, become more and more aware of what you don't know. So a lot of people feel that just because they earn the money, they exchange their human capital, their time, energy, and talent for financial capital, it gets deposited in their bank account, they think they know best what to do with it. That's not necessarily true. you don't know necessarily what to do with it. It is definitely yours. You did earn it. You have all rights to it. But you have to employ some leverage, which is taking someone like Dr. Wallace or myself that knows more than you about this, because that's all we do, and using our expertise to get you farther and faster than you would go on your own. So financial education is this process by which I continually find out just how much I don't know. Like there's several frameworks about this. It's like the Johari window is one that comes to mind, where it's this blind spot in your window where you just don't know. It would be very akin to if you were walking around with something in your teeth and you couldn't see because you don't have a mirror in front of your face, and somebody goes, hey, you got something in front of your teeth. So that's where people are missing. They're missing that most of the time in their financial life, they got blind spots. And those blind spots could be particularly costly depending on, how they behave. So that would be my definition of financial education.
Future Wealth Builders, Dominique is dropping some serious knowledge. Make sure you subscribe to the New Wealth Way podcast. Again, we'd like to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule. So, I love how you distinguish between financial educators, counselors, and planners. And looking at my model, where do you think that emphasis should be in reflection to the stages individually with the ultimate goal of achieving and creating financial footprints towards generational wealth?
This is an excellent question. And a lot of things are going through my mind, but I think in a word or a phrase, I would say we need more industry consolidation. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, although I even teach people how to open their own firms, I think there needs to be better collaboration. And that just means that financial planners need to work with financial coaches, not just estate planning attorneys and other COIs to help build their business. And I've just had so many conversations that there's just too much individualism in order to solve this big problem. In order to answer some of those knocks, going back to that analogy, that we're going to have, I'll talk about myself for a second. So I'm a certified financial planner. My planning fees are not cheap. They're an investment. And therefore, if somebody comes to me at stage 5 or 6, as I have done for the last 2 or 3 years, I refer them to someone else. Because what I realize is that although I can create a financial plan for them, my lane is not to walk you through, this internal ecosystem, this genetic code and financial healing. Not my lane. I actually don't have the temperament for that. There's other people that are more well suited. And so what do? I make an introduction. And so whether we're physically, partnering together in a firm enterprise, which is a little bit more difficult to pull off, which I understand, then I think each CFP, each financial planner, each person in my role should have a Rolodex of people that when a person is not a good fit, don't just try to put a square peg in a round hole. Refer them to other people within your network that will allow them to get to this stage. The point is where are they now? Be aware enough, self-aware enough to be like, this is not my lane. I really need to refer this to somebody else that does this better than I. It's not your zone of genius, nor your zone of excellence. So you should definitely refer out. So I think that's kind of like, that's where I would take it. Should be way more consolidation and collaboration inside the industry.
I want to kind of extrapolate on that, because I want to ask you then, that's a great point. Why do you think that is not the case though?
How much time do we have? So the industry, and I can talk about this pretty bluntly because I've been unplugged from the matrix for quite some time. The way the industry is created, for people that don't know, is most financial professionals that enter the industry have a very low bar of entry. You can literally pass an exam that takes you maybe 30 days of study from, or life and health exam, and you can call yourself a licensed agent, and you can use the term financial professional. There's 600,000 people using that term as of last count. So that's not too hard. They can call themselves a financial advisor, if you will, financial professional, and be lumped into the same group of people as me, which is a certified financial planner that takes a lot more obstacles to get to this course. So I guess my point is the playing field is not level. Then you have firms that employ these people. They're called broker dealers, and broker dealers can be publicly traded, privately traded, doesn't really matter. But the point is most broker dealers are structured to hire that person as a registered representative of that firm. Whereas you got the stakeholders of the firm, the principals, all the people that are in the firm. If it's a pretty large broker dealer and it's publicly traded, like a Schwab or a Fidelity or TD Ameritrade, all those people, then we got stockholders also. So I guess my point is you have to question whether or not that person that's working with you is actually a fiduciary, since there's 2 other people ahead of you in line, stockholders, firm stakeholders, then the client. So if you look at it from that standpoint, there's a lot of different reasons why the industry incentivizes new entrants into the field, first-year advisors, to sell products, to gather AUM, because it's very competitive. I mean, I think it's like 6 firms that control, 60% of the wealth, or no, 10 firms that control 60% of the wealth, managed wealth. So like when you start looking at those numbers, then you start to realize why the failure rate for first year advisors is like 72%, because everybody is pushed into a sales role versus an advisory role because the firms at the top are trying to jockey for position. Now, is that to say all firms are like that? No. It's just to say that the firms that fall into the category that I just explained, that's how they groom new people into the industry. So that's the reason why consolidation and collaboration is very hard, because we're bred to compete against each other.
So how does media and social media play in the financial space today? And the second part of that question is, where do you see it going forward? So let's go back to the first part.
Yeah.
How does media and social media play in the financial space today?
I believe in 2024, without an online presence, you're pretty dead in the water. Is that to say you have to have an online presence without and can be successful without one? No, I think it's just becoming more few and far between that that's the case. Just because most people realize, let's say the demographic of anybody below the age of 50, because that's just where I am, and I'm a Gen Xer, right? So before I make a decision to purchase anything, services or products, definitely services, man, I'm online researching reviews, your last post on social media. I do all this before I even hit your website in some instances, or reach out to you, definitely. I got to believe that most people are doing it. And if you don't have a presence, when so many other people do, it's just like you kind of knock yourself down a notch. So I think from just the standpoint of being out there, what I call myself a public-private person, we don't have to show everything, or you can not have to reveal things. But I think in today's age where people can Amazon Prime and Netflix on demand and DoorDash, like you can't have lower visibility or a lack of transparency in financial services. I remember my wife said this several years ago when I decided to transition from doing audio podcasts to doing video. The premise or the notion behind that was, my wife was like, let me get this straight. You're trying to get people to invest their money with you, but you're not showing your face. And I was like, wow, that was aha. So from then on, I started doing video. There will be a time in the not so distant future that if you don't have online presence, let's call it a digital footprint, you're going to lose market share. You might be out of business in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree with that, because there's so much information that is out there, which leads to my next question. With all of the information that's out there, in your opinion, what's the pros and cons of it in the financial industry?
Since there's so much information out there, as a financial practitioner or provider, that's not where your value lies. Your value does not lie in collecting more information. I would almost argue that your value lies in, at least primarily, in condensing and or simplifying all the information that's out there for the consumer. So it's, how do I take and I use this all the time with my prospect. I tell them that my primary job is, how do I take my limited time and money and spread that across unlimited choices? That's your job as a financial provider, financial services provider. Whether you're a coach, whether you're a therapist, whether you're an advisor, whatever you call yourself, that's the job. Help someone take their limited time and money and spread that across unlimited choice. We have more, like infinite choices, like almost so much so that I get just like analysis paralysis and kind of just like freeze up and don't do anything. That's most people's problem. They haven't done anything. They've lost time, which is one of the most valuable resources, if not the most valuable, because they've had indecision, because they don't know exactly what to do, because there's so many bunny trails to hop around. There's so many gurus out there. There's so many different things that they often get frozen. That's why they need a trusted advisor to come onto the scene where they can leverage the expertise of that trusted advisor and carve out 2 to 3 paths that make the most sense, that get them faster.
And oftentimes, they're stuck, as you say, analysis by paralysis, goes back to stage 1 and stage 2, because they have the internal, external ecosystems that they're dealing with as well. So as I always mention, that your first financial fiduciaries are your parents or your aunties or your grandparents, of things of that nature. So it's a perpetual cycle that has led. And so it's unbeknownst to you that you're carrying this throughout your life. Now you get to stage 2, you have the anxiety, as you mentioned earlier. And now we're asking, okay, and I love how you said that, my lane isn't the financial healing. It's more so I'm going to refer you to someone that can help you along those lines, because they're bringing in all this information. So it goes back to your analysis by paralysis. Too much information. They may have been burned. They may have heard something along those lines. So they don't have the trust, as you mentioned earlier. And we hear so much of people, rich, poor, right in the middle, that have been burned by some financial guru, if you will, simply because they were in it for the wrong reason. So all of that, you're taking on like 20, 30 years of information. When they come sit down with Mr. Henderson, the CFP, literally you have to reprogram their financial genetic code to get to where to be. But again, as you mentioned, you're a counselor, you're educator, you're planner. There's so many different stages, and not everybody is ready for financial planning. Not everybody's ready for that. And I think that's the first step. They have to understand, I'm not ready for financial planning. Just because the Bitcoin is out, I'm going to go buy. No, you have to have a true understanding of what's going on. So here's a question for you. Financial literacy is now becoming the new sexy topic. However, do you believe that financial literacy is the end all to creating generational wealth?
It's a very core component, let's say that. So here's a good example from my recent trip to Asia. We went to Dongdaemun Market, which is like a huge market. Just imagine New York Times Square for several blocks with eateries and just anything you can imagine, like street vendor wise. It's overwhelming. It's like 26 malls and 20,000 shops. So we're there and we're wanting to sample food. We're in, right in the heart of Seoul. And it's like, let's get some of this stuff, man. This food, it looks so great. Well, they don't take US dollars. You got to have Korean won. So I needed to find an ATM machine so that I can exchange my dollars for won. Well, in the Dongdaemun Market, there's these people in red coats that help translate and give you a map, but they're like in very strategic spots. So if you don't know where they are, you got to just kind of run into them. So imagine me knowing just a little bit of Korean, like, 감사합니다, which is like, thank you. Looking for an ATM, like, do you take US dollars? And nobody knew what I was saying. I was not literate in the native language. There's very little I could do besides just wander around aimlessly in hope that I found the right answer. I don't think that metaphor is any different than anybody that tries to wander around aimlessly trying to get to their financial goal without financial literacy.
That's a great analogy to take a look at, because I do believe that financial literacy is a piece to the puzzle. It's a piece to the puzzle because the final analysis, again, is that, we're trying to get to a point, because we can't work forever, Dominique. We can't work forever. And as you and I know, we want to get to a point where we can have a great retirement. That's what we want. We want to be able to enjoy our lives, travel, not have the stress, because financial health gives you financial stress too. So we want to make sure that, we're in a position we can enjoy our grandkids, travel. We have no issues, if you will. And literacy is a piece to that, but there's so many other components, as you mentioned earlier, that would allow us to get to where we ultimately want to get to is financial well-being, eventually get to generational knowledge to ultimately create the financial footprint to generational wealth.
What I would add to that framework is, how can I, let's say I'm my age, right? I'm right in my prime, if you will, of peak earnings and stuff. And I'll probably do this, because of the career I'm in, I can do it a little bit longer than someone that's actually manually labor. I talk to a lot of my clients that want to have their cake and eat it too, which I think is okay in this particular instance, meaning that, as a financial planner, I can create them this, plan that in 30 years, everything's going to be honky-dory, you're going to save, you're going to do this, da-da-da-da. Let's say they don't make it to 30 years. For whatever reason, some health issues, premature death, any of those things could happen. How can people start to bring some of what they want to experience in retirement years into the now? And I think that's possible because you can start to live for what you're trying to create. There's lifestyle adjustments that you can make now, right? Like, for instance, somebody would call the trip I just took with my family, a bucket list trip. Well, I didn't want to make it a bucket list because my someday, maybe never list, I'm trying to keep that real short. I don't know how much time I have down here. So all that to say, I think there's a new wave of planning coming in where people are trying to adopt. George Kinder talks about this in his book, Life Planning, being able to bring some of the future into the present.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this has just been an outstanding episode. I appreciate you taking time out. Future Wealth Builders, I hope you enjoy. I hope you're taking notes. Dominique Henderson's coming on and dropping some knowledge. Final question for you, Dominique. What do you want the listeners to take away from this podcast?
Oh, wow. If you are a consumer of financial services, I want to first say, I hear you. I see you. I've talked to a lot of you. And just on behalf of the industry, I apologize because we have not done the best job to serve you. The industry is maybe about 60 years old and we're still learning. We're not as old as medicine. We're not as old as even accountancy. And we're learning and we're going to get better. So endure with us just a little bit longer as we get better, as we strive to get better. Conversations like this make the industry better. So hats off to you, Dr. Wallace, for brokering this type of process. For industry practitioners, you need to get better too. There's levels of mastery here. The first is, and this is borrowed from Dr. Myron Golden, you have ignorancy, was an absence of the truth. It's just ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. We all started here. Then you go from the absence of truth or ignorance to knowledge, which is really just the assimilation of truth, right? We're accumulation rather of gathering facts. We're gathering the what's about something. We don't really know the how yet. That's the next stage, which is the assimilation of truth with this understanding. Now we can start to put together some things about how things work. If you go and take a CFP class and you're at Golden Gate right now, you're giving your students a lot of information, some case studies, but they haven't applied it yet. So they don't really actually know how the sausage is made necessarily until they get in and start getting some dirt under their fingernails. And then finally, you get to wisdom, right? Where we have that total application of truth. That's where everybody needs to get in this industry, no matter if you're a coach, no matter what type of financial professional you are. You want to best be able to serve the people you're called to. And that means getting to a point of mastery. And that's what I would say to the practitioners in the audience.
Dominique, please provide your contact information if someone would like to gain your services.
Yeah. So the best thing to do, I'm all over social media under the moniker Dom Henderson SR. That stands for Dominique Henderson Sr., because there is another Dominique rolling around here, Jr. I would start there. I'm very, very approachable on social media. Sometimes, as Dr. Wallace knows, it takes me a little while to get back to you, but I will. That's the best way to Dom Henderson SR on social media, domhendersonsr.com, the website, get you to all of my goodies and stuff like that.
Future Wealth Builders, make sure that you follow Dominique Henderson. Again, he has some great content on YouTube, video versus audio as well. Thank to his wife, because his wife did push him in that right direction, as would my wife as well. She told me exactly what I need to do. So that's why, we have a podcast as well. What would I do without her? Again, thank you for coming on, man. So Future Wealth Builders, this has been a great, great episode. I hope you enjoyed this as Dominique Henderson shares some great insight in this business. On behalf of the New Wealth Wave podcast, my producer, Ray Haycraft, Dominique, we'd like to thank you for coming on again and taking time out of your busy schedule. And Future Wealth Builders, as we always say, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And we'll see you on the next New Wealth Wave podcast. Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the New Wealth Wave podcast.